Hello everybody and welcome to episode 5 of the Digital Marketing Podcast. Today on the show I have a very special guest, a man called Ben Furfie is going to be joining me today, and we're going to be talking all about WordPress. Well, I say we're going to be talking about all things WordPress. We might have gone off into a slight tangent. The conversation we had went on a little longer than expected, so what I've done is I have split this podcast out into 2 episodes. One is a little bit more about WordPress than the other, and the second one is loosely related to WordPress. That's probably the best that I can say, but it is a good conversation because our conversation went on to why we use WordPress, what's the history of WordPress, why is it the content management system of choice, and Ben was a great person to talk about this because he does have a real in-depth, passionate knowledge about these things, and when it comes to web technologies and web development, then Ben really is the person to speak to. He's really, really cool, really good guy, he's really funny, so it was a really awesome conversation. So we talked about first of all, why WordPress is a good choice or bad choice, and when the appropriate time is to move over to WordPress, whether the web-based platforms are really having an effect on how they've developed and things like that, whether they're having an effect on the sort of what would usually be referred to as the WordPress market, that core market that they all have, why people choose WordPress over anything else. Why is it the go-to option for a content management system? And we spoke about whether WordPress is something that is only going to get stronger, or is it going to get worse? Which is where the conversation, for me personally, got really, really interesting. And it's really poignant at the moment as well, because the question I asked Ben was all about site speed and the optimization of WordPress, whether it was a little slow nowadays, whether it was clunky. And if you have a WordPress website yourself, you may have noticed this. So I wanted to ask the question, is it because we're using WordPress in this way and we're just plugging all these plugins and add-ons and things into it that it's slowing everything down? So I wanted to ask that question, and whether WordPress isn't the solution, the go-to solution anymore, whether there's something else on the horizon. Which is something, since I've had this conversation with Ben, I've been looking more into, and I might do a podcast in the coming future about the options that there are out there other than WordPress to build your website on. Because for me, and I know the world of web developers are very split on this opinion of whether WordPress is the way to go. Some people hate WordPress, some people love WordPress. For me, WordPress is a blogging platform, and that's what it is. Bare bones essentials, it's a blogging platform. And Ben makes a really good point that, it wasn't that long ago that WordPress actually put pages as an inbuilt feature. It was all used to be just posts and stuff, because that's what WordPress was. It was a blogging platform. And we've sort of mangled and twisted WordPress into this thing which creates websites, and now suddenly it's the go-to content management platform for people building websites. Not just for people building them on their own, but for agencies as well. A large proportion of agencies use WordPress, and I wanted to get to the bottom of why that was. So it is a really interesting conversation, and we sort of go off over the next 2 episodes. You'll see us go off on little tangents here and there, but it is really interesting stuff. I hope you'll listen to it. I hope you enjoy it. This is Ben Furfie, and we are talking about everything to do with WordPress, and then some. One last thing before I get into the show, into the interview rather, and that is I've got to make an apology. I think I mucked up on my side with some settings and buttons and whatsoever, so you might notice that my voice is a lot worse than what it is right now. Apologies for that. Please bear with me. I promise that you future interviews will never go like that again. Okay, so with me today, I have Ben Furfie. Ben, introduce yourself. What do you do?
So I'm Ben, obviously, and I am a web developer. I work for the marketing departments of a large multinational PLC, and I basically handle everything to do with website development for all the group's websites.
Awesome, excellent. So I'm presuming, as I've got you on this podcast today, that you know a lot about WordPress.
Yeah, I'd hope so.
Phew, there you go. There's my heart has now calmed down a little bit. My heart rate has settled. Decision number one has actually gone well. Okay, so tell me a little bit about WordPress. What's the background? What's the story?
Yeah, so WordPress is a piece of software that allows you to edit your website. And what I mean by edit your website is look at the content that is on the website. So that can be text, that can be images, it can be video, and make changes yourself without having to rely on knowing code or paying a web developer to make the changes for you.
Okay, that's cool. So essentially what we're saying is websites in general, they are built using lots of code, lots of HTML, lots of CSS, lots of other JavaScript weirdy stuff, sometimes PHP, and WordPress allows you to not see any of all that jazz and will just allow you to see the actual stuff that you see on the page. You made a really good point there, and it's a point that I wanted to come back to, because you said a phrase there about a CMS, a content management system. Why is a content management system important? What is a content management system, and what can go wrong or happen if you don't utilize a content management system?
Okay, so a content management system, like I said, is a piece of software that sits on the server that your website sits on. And the idea is it gives you, a bit like Microsoft Word, a way of editing the content in a way that you wouldn't be able to if you didn't have a content management system on there. And there are lots of different types of content management systems. You've got content management systems like WordPress that try to do everything. You've got content management systems like, say, for example, Perch, which is a really small content management system and is very specialized at making very small parts of websites editable. You've got much larger content management systems that are designed to provide major big companies with as much control as they could possibly want. It really sort of scales over the whole breadth of different website sizes. So the reason why you'd want a content management system is if you ever need to make changes to your website and you can't code, or if the words or letters, FTP or, sort of SSH, you've got no idea what those are, then a content management system makes it very, very simple, relatively speaking, to make changes to the website without having to pay a developer to do that.
So can I utilize that as a rule of thumb then? If you don't know the words FTP and SSH, then utilize a content management system.
Yeah, although to be fair, I think there's quite a few WordPress developers, and I'm making bunny ears there, who don't know what SSH is either, so don't take that as a golden hard and fast rule.
Yeah, all right. So WordPress essentially is a content management system. It allows you to easily edit and access the content on your website and manage that in a way where you don't have to overly get very codey. Obviously, Kodi not being the visual platform that you can put all your movies on and people stream illegally online, but the means of being able to code. So why is WordPress the king? And I suppose I'll do the bunny ears here as well. The king of content management system. What has made it so popular? Why is this platform taken off in the way that it has?
Okay, so it's a really good question. My personal opinion, I've been building websites since 2001. My first time I came across WordPress was 2009. It was released in 2013. It's actually just celebrated its 15th birthday. And around 2009, 2010, 2011 is when it really started to take off. And that is largely down to a couple of factors that came together at the same time.
Okay.
Up until that point, like I said, if you'd wanted to make changes to your website, you had to pay for a developer to make those changes for you. This is in the days of when developers weren't called developers. You had web designers and webmasters. The very, very old archaic terms that thankfully aren't around anymore.
Webmaster.
Yeah.
Did we just like wizardry and stuff like that? I love the term.
I think it's sort of
Webmaster.
it's carried on, hasn't it, with the stupid things of like Web Ninja and other job titles that really shouldn't exist. But yeah, so as I was saying, at the time, about 2009, 2013, it was really uncommon for you to be able to make changes to your website. I know people who built their own websites and obviously having learned could do it. But for, Joe Bloggs running a plumber who maybe had a website, it wasn't possible for them to edit it. But what you found happening at the same time was more and more people were understanding that, you had to get to the top of the search engines. Google was becoming incredibly important. It was really the turning point where the yellow pages started going from being the type of thing that you could use to climb into the loft to, something that you could barely swat a fly with. It was that time.
Just to point out, I use it for spiders. That's my key place where I use the yellow pages now. It is for killing and crushing. Not that I'm condoning killing and crushing spiders, but yellow pages is fantastic for it because you don't even need to push it down. It's got so much weight in it, it will crush it within seconds. If anything, it's probably a painless death. Apologies for interrupting. Carry on.
That's fine. I was just going to say, you've got to think, that's really bad marketing for pest control people if the actual thing they're advertising and it's just as effective. So yeah, as I was saying, it was at that point that people were really recognizing that Google was crucial to sort of being able to be found, and it was really taking over from the yellow pages. And it was around that time that a lot of people were really starting to grasp the idea behind content marketing. And of course, content marketing is the idea of producing content that people want to read.
Yeah. Bare bones, you're absolutely right. People try and overcomplicate this massively, but you've just, in about 3 words, condoned content marketing to it. That is essentially what it is. Content marketing is making content that people want to read, and that is it.
And what I'd expand on that to completely defeat the point of getting it in 3 words. Google is very much a question and answer engine.
Yes.
It's not, people make it out to be this massive mystery, that people don't know how. It's really simple. Google wants to be able to answer questions. If you actually look at the type of questions people ask, they're really semantic questions of where can I find a barber near me? Where is the nearest vet? When is, my local tandoori open until? That type of thing is what people actually enter, and it's that type of content that they want to read, so to speak. They want the answers to the questions that they have. But anyway, that's slightly going aside. And at that point, you were getting a lot more companies sort of adopting blogging. Yeah. And of course, WordPress is core. I always hesitate to call WordPress a content management system because if anybody's ever installed it bare bones, they'll know that the only inputs that you get are a title and content. It's not really great for editing websites.
Yeah.
But I'll come back to that later on. So it was very much a blogging platform. It still is very much a blogging platform. And people are starting to say, well, if I can make changes to my website and I can publish new pages through this, why are you charging me, £100, £200 to change my phone number? Yeah. So really it was in the right place at the right time, and people started twisting it and making it do things it was never intended to do. Like I said, WordPress out of the box comes with a title and a content field, and that content field is like your Word document. Yeah. You can, you've got a limited amount of stuff that you can do. Everything's in one block. It's not very easy to manage. It's very easy to accidentally delete something that you don't want to delete. But people started twisting it and contorting it and making it do things that it wasn't ever really designed to do. But that was effectively why it became so popular. It became a way for people to give business owners that functionality that they craved, that ability to make changes to the website without having to pay a developer.
Okay, so I suppose the point from this is, so obviously WordPress, in short, WordPress built and designed as a blogging platform, still is widely utilized as a blogging platform to this very day, and then its popularity came about because being able to easily edit and amend the content that was within the website itself that people wanted to do, and not having to shell out, like, say, hundreds of pounds in order just to change the telephone number, which is a really good example. And some agencies still do this, by the way. It was really easy for them to utilize the platform, to access the platform in order to change their content. So you say it was sort of twisted into a means of which it wasn't really uniquely core design. Does that have any ramifications then? This way that WordPress has been sort of contorted as a means of creating what are, on the whole, sort of static websites with blogs sort of bolted onto the side. I mean, to be fair, WordPress is meant to be just the blog bit that you see, perhaps with a static page on top of it, but really, what you do get now from WordPress websites is you have a series of static pages that always be, and then the blog is a secondary consideration. So, is there a downside to that contortion that's happened to WordPress and utilizing WordPress in that way?
So, at its core, a website and WordPress in particular is a set of rules, which is all development really is. It's a set of rules. If this, do that. That enable you to make changes to information that's stored in the database. The database is like a vastly complicated Excel spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet is that database is typically set up in a particular way to work at an optimum with a particular way. And so for WordPress, it's set up to manage posts, manage post titles, and manage post content. Yeah. So a really interesting thing about this is that what a lot of people won't realize, especially if they've only just started using WordPress in the last 5 years, is that when it came out, it didn't actually have the ability to add pages. I think that only came in maybe around 2008, so 5 years after it launched. Okay. It was only ever posts that you could actually do. And a page is, as far as the database is concerned, a post. Yeah. Everything is a post.
Because essentially it's the same thing. It's just one static and that stays on the page forever and is in quote unquote evergreen. The other is a little bit more timely, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, even extends down to, say, for example, your any images you upload, they are technically a post. Right. Everything is technically treated as a post, and the reason why that's an issue is that it causes performance issues when you start trying to get things to work in a way that they weren't intended to, and ultimately that's one of the big issues with trying to twist something that was never really intended to be a content management system to make it do all these things. It has an impact in terms of performance, in terms of usability. One of the classic things that I always point out to people, developers mainly, but people who are maybe a little bit more interested in sort of the sort of business and the logical reasons of why you choose one content management system over another, is that the idea behind a content management system is to allow you to manage content. Yeah. And content can be anything from a title on a page through to the text on a particular section of the website. And really what should be happening is that it should be done in a way that's called structured content. The idea behind that is that you have one field for each part. And that field might be a date picker, it might be just a single line, it might be multiple lines, it might be a WYSIWYG like the editor interface in WordPress is, which is what you see is what you get editor. But they should be structured in that way, and it should be stored in the database that way, and it makes it much quicker for the website to retrieve and to serve. And it all has, the reason why it's relevant is because it has an impact on SEO. Now, realistically, for your, sort of plumber in the local area who's maybe just setting up a website to, sort of post some bits and pieces, that speed isn't going to make a massive difference. But for large companies like the one I work for, that can become a problem. And that's really where the issues with that lay.
So I have another question. It's completely off topic, and it's a very interesting one. So I was having a conversation with on LinkedIn actually today. He'd posted something about site speed and the effects that has on an SEO level. And there's obviously, we're getting very technical. We're going to get very SEO here, but it's a really key and crucial point. It's something that's a bit of a bugbear of mine at the moment. And that is that, at the moment, Google has a fixation. I call it a fixation. It's completely logical fixation, with, first of all, mobile sites. And that is in turn due to mobile first indexing and things like that. If you don't understand what I'm saying, just ignore it for the time being. But mobile sites, very, very key at the moment. It's one of Google's big priorities. And in line with that is site speed, which we're talking about here. Do you think, in your humble opinion, I think that site speed is going to become more and more key as a ranking metric? That's my opinion. Because being able to look at websites on a mobile device in a place or area where you don't necessarily have, Wi-Fi and you're only on 3G. Not everyone has 4G still. I know 5G's been sort of teetered around at the moment, but that's a long way off. Is this going to become a bigger ranking? If this becomes a bigger ranking metric, site speed, which I believe from the work I've been doing at the moment it is, and the uplift that I've seen from doing site optimization and stuff like that, does this mean that WordPress, being the, I'm not saying you said this, but this is my personal opinion, being the bit of a mangled sort of platform that it is, it's a bit of a hob job, it's things sort of bung together, do you think that will have more of an impact? If Google decides, right, site speed is a bigger ranking metric than it was in the past, God knows how many years, do we think that these minute, and they possibly are minute, these minute changes in the slowdown that WordPress has as a platform on your site speed, do you think that will have quite a big impact?
Potentially, because the reason why I say potentially is that WordPress is actually effectively 3 different parts. And this is where, again, it sort of gets quite complicated. I'm just trying to think of how you explain this without it going very technical very quickly. You have what's known as WordPress core. And these are the functions, so the instructions that are within the software, within WordPress when you download it. So it's like absolute, you've just got basic WordPress. You've then got...
It's like installing Windows onto your machine when you first install it.
Yeah. So that's a really good example. You've then got, on top of that, 2 different things. You've got themes and you've got plugins. Now, again, many people who profess themselves as WordPress developers don't follow the certain rules that have been set up by people as best practices.
You shock me.
No, of course, shock horror. The general idea is that there's form and there's function. So a really good analogy would be a car. Oh, in fact, actually, no, not a car. Forget that, actually. No, actually, yes, let's use a car for this part. There's another analogy I've got in my head which will probably work better for maybe a little bit later on. WordPress is effectively the engine. The theme is what you actually see of the car, so the chassis and the colour
The
of the paint,
bodywork,
and
yeah.
that type of thing. And then plugins which are functionality are, sort of like things like maybe, I don't know, say things below the surface. So maybe like the quality of your speaker, or the little gadgets and stuff that you've got on top of it, maybe like heads-up display, or cruise control and that type of thing. So things that control the function.
Yeah.
Realistically, WordPress core itself is incredibly well optimized.
Okay.
The issue is actually more to do with plugins and themes. So themes from the perspective that they are what define, they're very much how the site looks. And within that, if they're not optimized and your off-the-shelf themes aren't, because they simply can't be, they have to cater to 1,000,001 different particular functions. That can slow things down. So I think you're going to see a lot of off-the-shelf themes being hammered by Google. Not necessarily say like the themes that power the websites of the companies, the group companies that I manage. They're very, very heavily optimized, and they're built custom for those companies. So they don't necessarily suffer from the same problems of, say, loading in 1,000,001 fonts from Google.
Yeah, the ones that have just been picked off the shelf and dumped onto a website without those considerations of the optimization further on down the line, they're maybe the ones that are going to suffer.
Yeah, and then you've obviously got plugins on top of that. That may be things like, your social share widgets that load in a lot of JavaScript, which is within websites. You've got 3 different core languages, as you said at the start. You've got HTML, which is like the structure. You've got CSS, which is the styling language, which tells a website how to look. And then you've got JavaScript, which is the behavior language. So the other analogy I was going to describe before is that of a door handle. You take a really, really small thing. If you think about it, it shares an awful lot with those 3 principles. You've got the HTML is the actual structure, so the actual door handle, the casing that goes around the door, the little bit that juts out and stops the door from opening when it's closed.
Yeah.
You've got CSS, which would be, how it looks. So is it a bar handle? Is it, is the casing round? Is it rectangular? Is it square? What color is it? What metal is it? And then you've got behavior, which is, if handle is pushed down, do this.
Yeah.
And this would be the function that controls the little bit that sticks out and closes the door. So if door pushed down, pull this in and allow the door to open.
Because of course some door handles, which annoys the heck out of me, if you pull them up, they also do that. But other door handles don't do that. Which is
exactly,
really...
yeah. Which is like a really badly programmed WordPress plugin. Some like, the other analogy would be like, some of these WordPress plugins are door handles, but they load in a particular, they're what is known as libraries. So they're another load of functions that make developers' lives easier. But they might load a library which to do one very, very small thing. But it also can control the temperature that a cooker is set at, and sort of whether ice can be dispensed via the internet. Completely pointless things. And again, that's
which,
where
by the way, during this UK summer, we would have all appreciated. Ice dispensing through the internet. I am all for. If there is such a library for such a thing, I'm down with that.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I used to live in the Middle East, and one of the things that I really missed from the Middle East, I remember speaking to one of the guys when I just moved over there, and as we were walking towards his car, he held down his car. Now, a lot of modern cars in the UK now have a form of this function where if you hold down the unlock, it'll actually wind the windows down.
Yes.
So typically, I think it's any model after about 2015 has it.
Yeah.
Now, over there, they have an extra little cool function, which is that when you do that, it starts the engine,
Which turns
puts the air conditioning
I see.
right up, pushes all the hot air out,
Yeah.
and then once the internal thermometer gets down to a certain point, it then shuts the window.
Close all the windows, yeah.
So, but anyway, I mean, I digress, like, that's, sort of like cool things to sort of get away with the summer. But, so the point I was making was that because these things aren't built custom, because they're built for 1,000,001 different use cases, you end up with a situation where a lot of stuff is being loaded in that isn't needed.
Yeah.
And that's where you're going to find that there's a lot of slowdown.
Yeah.
Now, this isn't something that's unique to WordPress. Joomla has exactly the same problem. A lot of other, sort of do-it-yourself code-based platforms have this problem. Drupal, not so much, just because Drupal, which is another content management system like WordPress, as is Joomla, is more used by larger companies who have more specific application-based needs. But even then, that the use of that has dropped massively in recent years. Because of that, it's one of those things where you get a lot of wasted information being pulled down. And one of the things that Google has said is that with the page speed is that they're trying to encourage developers and website owners to reduce the amount of stuff that they're sending down the pipe. Because, if you think about it, one of the things that always surprises a lot of people is that in Canada, mobile data is incredibly expensive. I think it's like 39 cents per megabyte. It is incredibly, it's like 5 or 6 times more expensive than
I have heard
a UK person downloading data in the US. It's incredibly expensive. And that's one of the things that they're looking to do, but obviously then there's all these metrics about, sort of having, faster the website loads, the more likely it is that they're going to be able to provide the answer and the happier the person is.
It's an interesting point, because that is a good point that people probably don't know. When you are on the internet, and it's probably not noticeable on desktops or laptops, or it's probably not noticeable on most devices, but when you are accessing a website, you're actually getting a lot more than you think of in terms of stuff that's coming to your phone. There's a lot of stuff which you may not even be able to see. It's just there in the ether, waiting to be used, hoping that it'll be used by a user, but it's still coming to your phone prior to all of that.
A really good example of this is that I think, I can't remember who did it, but they looked at average website pages, sizes of things that were off-the-shelf themes. Okay. And they were finding that the average page size was between 10 megabytes and 25 megabytes, which might not sound like a lot, but when you actually think about, that you are effectively, you might have a gig of data. That is, my math is terrible. I think 1,000th, anyway, it's something. It's quite a big
chunk. A considerable amount, yeah.
And if you think about that, that's being potentially downloaded every single time that you change a page and you load a page. So, I mean, that's part of the reason why they're cracking down on it. But yeah, I mean, the part of the point is that these are systems that are designed to really be used by developers, and so you've got a situation where the optimization is very much on the developer side. We can do loads of things to try and make that better, but ultimately they're not going to be as neatly packaged as, say, something like Shopify or Squarespace or Wix, where they have an interest themselves in just reducing the amount of data that you're using on their servers.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, it's one of those things. I mean, one last point about this on this particular question. When I was talking about the average page size being about 10 megabyte, even like on some optimized images, some optimized websites, about 60% to 70% of the entire amount of data that's being downloaded are just images. And quite often that's because, there's this big trend which is thankfully starting to disappear, of these massive, huge images that really don't serve much of a point apart from to make the website look pretty, being loaded at the top of the website. And quite often those images need to be as big as possible for those people who have 5 8K IMAX. So you need to upload an image that's 5,000 pixels wide, or something ridiculous like that. And those images can easily, even optimized, be a megabyte, 2 megabyte in size. But quite often, developers don't, because they either forget, or they don't have time, or they just simply don't know how to. Still set it so a mobile phone is downloading that same image, even though it doesn't need to be that big.
Yeah, scale it, and then try and scale it right down.
Yeah, so it's one of those things. There's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes with websites that are to do with speed optimization. That I think, sort of to circle back to the point or the question you were asking, which is, will WordPress websites be hurt by this? Yes, because ultimately they are things for you to optimize and customize yourself, and there's definitely a skill shortage in terms of, especially within the WordPress space, of people who actually understand what you need to do and how to achieve that.
That's really, really interesting. And you mentioned, obviously, in my last podcast, I had Kaz on, and we were talking about, and you mentioned them yourself, these web-based website builders. I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts and opinions on that, because I suppose the question I was going to lead into was, how do you feel about small business owners, startups and things starting a WordPress website? And obviously there are upsides, but without that technical expertise and knowledge and skill set to be able to do these things, it could be damaging. And I don't mean to be flippant about that comment, but it could be damaging, and you still need to know a certain amount. But so what's your opinion on the web-based website builders? And you're probably on the same wavelength as me, that you thought of them as laughable in the past, and they were rubbish. But is this coming full circle now? Should we be taking those website sort of builders a little bit more seriously for the startup, the small business?
Yeah, I mean, there's always been a whipping boy in the web development industry. When it comes to that type of thing, when I started, the whipping boy used to be Dreamweaver. Or from Microsoft Front Page, oh, you're building the website with us. Do you not know how to do it yourself? And to be fair, back then it was quite difficult. So, it's one of those things where there's always been whipping boys and stuff with that type of thing. And yeah, you're absolutely right that, it was a point that you brought up and Kaz brought up, in the conversation, which was, that you can do an awful lot of stuff with them now. It used to be that you couldn't put Facebook marketing pixels on. It used to be that Google Analytics couldn't be done. It used to be that you couldn't customize the metadata, which is a really fancy way for saying the information that Google reads when it visits your website. So the stuff that the title and the little snippet of text that it displays on the search, you never used to be able to edit those type of things in Weebly and Wix. Ironically, you can't do that with WordPress out of the box.
No, of course. Yeah, no, you absolutely.
You have to install a plugin. Everything you want to do in WordPress, you have to install a plugin. But anyway, realistically, what I would say is, if you really need to have a clear understanding of what you want to do with your website when you are working out whether you would choose a web-based website builder or a content management system-based website. So not just WordPress, but any content management system-based. And the primary one is, what is the purpose of the website?
Yes.
Is it literally just the modern equivalent of a Yellow Pages app?
Yeah.
That you've got a Facebook page, you've got a, maybe a Twitter page or a LinkedIn page, depending on your target market. And, they're landing on it and they're just getting your telephone number and that's it. Then they're contacting you and hey presto, that's all it is. If that's all you're doing, then you really don't need an all singing, all dancing website. No. Especially with the way that those tools have evolved over the years.
Yeah, because they used to be a bit laughable in terms of they would probably, you'd only want, I refer to them as business card websites. It was just, if you just want to present information, and even if you wanted to take a step further, you wanted to show off some of your work with images and pictures and stuff like that, that was still doable on these web-based platforms. But I suppose the consideration is that you can build that and do that absolutely fine on a web-based platform.
So I'd say there's two things within that. One is that an awful lot of businesses just need a business card.
Yeah.
Effectively, it is literally just what's their phone number, where are they based, where do they cover, how do I get in touch with you? Literally that type of thing. The second thing is there are still issues with web-based website builders. The biggest one being that you're editing the design and the content at the same time.
Okay.
Which leads to the possibility of you breaking the website. Mm-hmm. Now, myself personally, I know a lot of other professional web developers make it our sort of, in the same way that doctors have an oath to protect life, we kind of take it as our oath that you should not be able to break this website.
Yes.
If you can break the website, I've failed. You should not have the fear of being able to break this. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't say that to people because that's like a red flag to a raging bull. They'll go off and they'll break it just to prove them right. But in day-to-day running, you should be confident enough not to break it. And part of the problem is that because of the fact that the text that you're editing is within a box that you can click and drag and move, there is the possibility that you can break things. So that's the only issue that I'd really have with those particular systems. But if you're talking about something that's literally going to be a calling card or a business card, then, and you're not going to edit it, and chances are you're going to put it up there, you're going to leave it there, you're going to maybe update it if your phone number changes or if your address changes or your contact details change or whatever. If you add a particular service, use one of those services. They cost you, like Kaz said, they can cost you as little as £30 a year, and that's all your security, that's your backup, that's your maintenance, that's everything covered. All these things that you don't necessarily think about when you hear free. Associated with WordPress, or your hosting, all taken care of. And what's more important is that you've got somebody on the other end of the line that you're paying and you can trust to get something solved. So if you're literally just starting something up, use it. I've worked at startups where we've been fintech, so financial technology companies. We've used Squarespace.
Really?
Because it was just a really simple way of getting something up online that didn't require the developers to basically take their time off while they were developing an application. That was the core part of the business. So, these aren't necessarily tools for people who are too cheap to pay for a developer. These are tools that are actually really, really useful for people. I mean, they're still not used massively. I'm just looking at the recent stats from an organization called W3 Techs, which is the organization where you always hear the constant WordPress powers 30% of the internet stuff comes from. And looking at that, I mean, Squarespace accounts for, as of the 1st of July, so today, accounts for 1.2% of all websites. This time last year, it accounted for 0.7%. In terms of WordPress, within that same period of time last year, actually January I just realized it's 6 monthly. So at the same time as Squarespace accounted for 0.7, WordPress accounted for 29.2, and it increased to 31.1. Okay. So both of them are growing.
One's growing a lot faster, though.
WordPress is still growing ever so slightly faster. It's about 1.9% to 0.5%. But as I always say with WordPress ones, you've got to be careful because technically you can set a free WordPress website up. In the same way that Kaz was saying with Weebly, it'd be your site.weebly.com. You can get a free WordPress website that is your website.wordpress.com. And oh boy, if you look at the vast majority of those websites, they're spammers. They're spammers and their SEO black hat technique. People creating thousands of websites to create backlinks. They're not genuine websites.
No.
I mean, one really interesting statistic is that although the number of websites that are powered by WordPress is 31%, One part of it is that 48% of websites still do not have a content management system behind them.
Okay, so I'm going to stop right there with Ben, because like I said, the conversation did go off on a little bit of a tangent, and it went in a few different directions, but that doesn't mean it's absolutely boring. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the conversation there. I'm going to do another podcast coming up very, very soon, and we're going to do the second part of the conversation with Ben that goes off a little bit more technical, a little bit more, I don't know, top level sort of website considerations, development things. It's all still very, very useful. I do recommend that you go and listen to that one when it comes out. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed that conversation I had with Ben. Please do check him out. Go and start a conversation with him. If you do have any questions about web development, he's the man to speak to. In the meantime, if you want to get in contact with me, then you can go to the Facebook page at Digital Marketing Punk. Leave me a comment, send me a message, whatever. You can go and check me out on LinkedIn at Thomas Marriott. You can go and find me on Twitter at punk_digital. Send me a message. Tell me what you thought of that interview. Tell me what you think of the podcast in general. I will see you next time around on the Digital Marketing Punkcast. Thank you very much for listening.